My son said it before the lilies even wilted. Don't expect a dime from Dad's $92 million. He didn't ask how I was. He just split the fortune, cars, stocks, the house, like my husband's life was a spreadsheet. Someone told me to move downstairs. It's quieter there, they said. As if silence could hide shame, I didn't argue. Because the company they claimed wasn't just his, it was mine. Every loan, every signature, every sleepless year. I had proof. So when the lawyer pressed play, Henry's voice came through. Deduct $1 million for every word spoken against his mother. The room froze. 92, 91, 90. They thought I'd stay quiet. They forgot who taught silence to speak. When Henry died, people came from everywhere. Neighbors, investors, strangers with perfect condolences. He was a great man. He built something that will last forever. I smiled, nodded, thanked them. What I wanted was one quiet hour without pretending. Before I could take off my black dress, the house filled again. Daniel had invited everyone back, said it's what Dad would have wanted. But it didn't feel like grief. It felt like a board meeting. Numbers, contracts, valuations. Someone said the estate was worth $92 million. That was the first honest sentence all day. Daniel stood in the center of the room, glass raised high. Dad built an empire, he declared. Now it's our turn. Applause followed. Heather toasted to legacy. No one looked at me. I was holding a glass of tap water because no one thought to offer me anything else. They spoke of properties and shares, about rebranding the company. Daniel bragged he'd soon take the main office. It was all so fast, as if grief had a deadline. Ruby filmed everything on her phone. When she caught me in the frame, she whispered, "Grandma's still here, haunting us." Her friend laughed. They were right about one thing. Ghosts see everything. Then came the stickers. Green for Daniel, yellow for Heather, blue for the kids. One on the clock. Henry wound every morning, another on our wedding china, even one on his armchair. The empire of our life, now color-coded. I didn't stop them. Heather came over, voice syrup-sweet. "Mom, we set up a chair for you in the kitchen. It's quieter there." She meant out of the way, so I went. A folding chair, a paper plate, cold food. From the kitchen I heard laughter, talk of new paint and spa rooms. Someone said, "The house smells old." Another replied, "We'll fix that when she's gone." I gripped my fork until my hand ached. For years I thought losing Henry would be the hardest part. I was wrong. Watching our children turn into strangers was worse than any funeral. Daniel passed by later. "We'll make sure you're comfortable, Mom." Comfortable. That was his word for forgotten. When the last guest left, the house looked looted. Empty glasses, crumpled napkins, stickers everywhere. One blue tag clung to a photo of Henry and me, our 20th anniversary, standing before the company sign we built by hand. The tag said donation. I pulled it off slowly. That picture was proof of who built the dream. We, not he, and certainly not they. I threw the rest of the stickers into the trash. It didn't fix anything, but for a moment I felt visible again. By midnight, the house was silent. The ice in my glass had melted hours ago. $92 million upstairs. Zero dignity left downstairs. I whispered, "You think I'm finished? You have no idea what's coming." Then I went to bed still wearing black, not for Henry anymore, but for the family I'd just buried alive. A few days after the funeral, Daniel told the housekeeper, "Set up the basement for Mom. She needs quiet." He said it like kindness. I knew what it meant. Quiet meant out of sight. The basement had always been where we kept things we didn't need. Boxes, mops, old tools. Now it was for me. A single cot, one flickering lamp, concrete walls marked with old tape lines from when Henry used to store company equipment down here. Back then, he called it his workshop. Now it was my room. No one asked if I wanted it. Heather said it would be easier. No stairs, less noise. I nodded. After decades of keeping peace, you stop expecting anyone to ask what you want. That night, I couldn't sleep. Laughter drifted from upstairs. Music, clinking glasses, life. I sat on the cot, thin blanket on my knees, staring at the shadows. That's when I saw it. A dented metal box half buried behind a stack of mops. The label read 1998, private. I pulled it out. The hinges groaned. Inside were receipts, bank slips, and a small notebook. On the top page, Henry had written, Initial investor, ML, me, Margaret Lane. For a second, I just stared at it. The air felt heavier, almost electric. The numbers on those slips, $47,000 transferred to company capital, March 1998. That was my jewelry, my savings, my silence. I remembered one night that year, Henry at the kitchen table, head in his hands, whispering, "We're finished." He didn't know I was listening. The next morning I sold everything I owned, the gold bangles, the emerald necklace, even my wedding ring, and wired every cent to the business account. I didn't tell a soul. When Henry found out, he just stared at the deposit slip, then at me. "Someday," he said, "they'll know what you did." But someday never came. For years the story changed. He saved the company. He was the genius. My part vanished the way women's work always does. Quietly, politely, completely. I told myself it didn't matter. Survival was enough. But sitting in that basement, surrounded by dust and proof, I realized survival without credit isn't living. It's erasure. I turned the pages, meeting notes, letters to investors, calculations, both our handwriting. Henry had even stapled a memo confirming my deposit as part of the first capital fund. My name was right there, stamped and signed in black ink. I laughed under my breath. Not because it was funny, because after 27 years, the truth was still breathing in a rusted box no one cared to open. Upstairs, Ruby's voice pierced through the floorboards, arguing with someone. I closed the lid and set the box beside my bed. For the first time in weeks, I felt something sharper than grief. Not anger. Clarity. The next morning, Heather brought a tray of food. "We'll make things more comfortable soon," she said. "Daniel's been busy with the company." I didn't touch the food. She glanced at the box. "What's that?" "Old papers," I said. "Just memories." She smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "That's sweet." Then she left. When the door closed, I opened the notebook again. On the last page, Henry had written only one line. "To the one who believed first." No signature, no explanation. I didn't need one. I sat there a long time staring at those words. He kept the empire, I kept the receipt. And for the first time I understood. Proof doesn't beg to be seen. It just waits for the right moment. That night I organized everything. Deposit slips, letters, bank memos, into 2 piles. When I finished, I took a marker and wrote one word on the lid. Proof. It looked small but powerful. I'd lived almost 70 years without needing it. Now it was the only thing that made me visible. Later, Daniel came down. He stood awkwardly by the door. "Mom, is everything okay down here?" "Just fine," I said. "Good. We'll have the lawyer come next week. A few papers to sign." I smiled. "I'll be ready." He didn't know what I meant. After he left, I touched the box again. The metal was cold, steady, real, like the truth itself. Henry built the empire. But that night, in the quiet basement, I realized something far greater. He built it with my money, my hands, and my silence. Now, silence was over. That night, after the funeral, they called it a family dinner. I wasn't hungry, but I went anyway. That's what mothers do. We show up even when no one saves us a seat. The dining table looked different. The candles were gone. Henry's photo, the one from our 25th anniversary, had disappeared. When I asked where it went, Heather said, "We thought it would be better to pack it away for now." Pack him away? Like he was just another box to move out of the house? Daniel sat at the head of the table, cutting into a steak the way his father used to. He didn't look at me when he said, "Gigio, don't worry, Mom. You'll be taken care of." Heather smiled right after as if they'd rehearsed it. "We're already reviewing Dad's accounts," she added. We'll make things simple." Simple. To them, that word meant fast. No questions, no signatures from me. There wasn't a seat for me at the table. Heather pointed to a folding chair near the pantry. "We didn't expect this many guests," she said. "You'll be fine there." The chair wobbled when I sat. I could see everyone, but no one looked back. They passed dishes, laughed, planned. Ruby scrolled through her phone between bites. Her brother argued over who'd get the lake house. It wasn't a dinner, it was a shareholders' meeting. They spoke in numbers, not memories. Transfer. Liquidate. Simplify. Each word scraped away another piece of what used to be a family. Heather raised her glass. To new beginnings. Daniel added, Dad would want us to move fast. They clinked glasses over a man not yet cold. I looked at the empty wall behind Daniel. The portrait that used to hang there, Henry at the company's 15th anniversary, was gone. Where's your father's photo? I asked. Heather smiled. We're redecorating. It's time for a new chapter. A new chapter. I guess I wasn't in it. Daniel turned to me. Once we settle everything, Mom, you'll have your allowance. The lawyer said it'll take a few weeks. We'll make sure you're comfortable. Comfortable? That word again. A soft way to say forgotten. I nodded. Of course, I said. That was all. But something inside me shifted. For years, I thought silence was love. That night, it felt like permission, and I wasn't giving it anymore. They kept talking about Dad's empire, about expanding, modernizing, merging accounts. No one mentioned who wrote the first check. But I remembered. First, Georgia Holdings. 1998. Account opened under Henry's name, co-signed by me, ML co-founder. My name still on the seal, the bank memo, the capital ledger. They thought I didn't know. They thought I'd forgotten. Heather stood collecting plates, looking pleased. We'll meet the lawyer next week, she said. Let's get this wrapped before the end of the month. Daniel nodded. Good idea. We'll move fast. I looked at them both and smiled. Yes, I said softly. You should. No one noticed the way I said it. When the room emptied, I picked up my glass of water and walked toward the basement. No one stopped me. As I reached the door, Ruby whispered to her brother, She doesn't even know what's happening. He laughed. I kept walking. Downstairs, the air was colder, cleaner. I opened the metal box, took out the old bank papers, and traced my name. Margaret Lane, co-founder. The ink had faded, but it was still there. They wanted simplicity. I wanted truth, and truth doesn't ask permission to exist. The morning after that dinner, I woke up early. Laughter drifted from upstairs. Not the warm kind, but the kind that sounds like it's at someone's expense. Mine, probably. In the living room, Ruby and her friend were hunched over a phone, muffling giggles. I stood in the doorway until she noticed me. She froze, then gave me that quick, guilty teenage smile. Morning, Grandma, she said too lightly. What's so funny? I asked. Oh, nothing. Her friend flipped the phone face down. I didn't push it. You learn when you're the joke without needing to ask. Later, I found out. Her phone was charging on the dining table, screen lit. The video started by itself. The title read, My Ghost Grandma, or Shark Still Breathing But Barely. It was me, sitting at that folding chair, hands trembling around a glass of water. The caption said, Yama, she's still here. Kind of. Hearts, laughing emojis, ghost icons. I stared at myself on the screen, smaller than I remembered. Not angry, something worse. Invisible. Maybe that's exactly how they saw me. That afternoon, I printed a still from the clip using the old office printer. The picture came out grainy, but it was enough. I taped it to the wall above my cot and wrote under it in red ink, A ghost remembers everything. It wasn't a threat. It was a reminder, for me. That night, footsteps came down the stairs. I thought it was Daniel, but it was Ruby. Her voice was small. Grandma? Yes, sweetheart? I didn't mean it like that, she said. It was just a joke. Everyone thought it was funny. I nodded. I know. It's easier to laugh at someone than to understand them. Her eyes wandered to the table, paper spread out, signatures, bank slips, and the old notebook labeled the Atlas Formula. Henry used to call it that, the system that saved his company. She flipped it open and frowned at the handwriting. Wait, this is the company model. I said nothing. You helped write this? I didn't help, I said. I wrote most of it. Her eyes widened. She skimmed the pages, charts, calculations, notes in two hands. But Dad said, I know what he said, I interrupted, and I let him. It's easier to let people believe their version of history. She went quiet. I could almost see it, the moment truth replaced the story she'd been told. Confusion, shame, maybe a spark of respect. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone?" she asked. "Because no one was listening," I said. She closed the notebook, gentle like it was something sacred. "Can I read it?" "Maybe later," I told her. "For now, it stays here." At the bottom of the stairs, she turned back. "I'm sorry about the video." I smiled. "Don't be. Sometimes you need to see how cruelty looks before you recognize it." When she left, the room felt different. Not empty, just quieter. I looked up at the photo on the wall, that shaky image of me with the red words beneath. "A ghost remembers everything," I whispered, "and sometimes a ghost teaches the living." Something had shifted. Maybe not in Daniel or Heather, but in Ruby, yes. I saw it in her eyes. The moment truth touched her, something broke open. The next generation doesn't always need punishment, just proof. After Ruby left that night, I couldn't sleep. The box sat on the table like a beating heart. Something in me whispered, "Keep digging." I went through every folder again. Receipts, contracts, letters. I already knew them by heart. And then, at the very bottom, a manila envelope I hadn't seen before. Atlas simulation, patent draft. My hands trembled. The pages were yellowed, edges curled, but the handwriting was mine. Every formula, every projection, every margin line, mine. I'd written it back in 1997 when I was still teaching part-time at the community college, testing small data models that predicted market shifts. I thought it was just a hobby. Henry thought otherwise. He'd read my notes one night, smiled that half smile, and said nothing. A few months later, he used the same equations to pitch his investors. That pitch became the first $1.2 million check for Lane Analytics. I was proud back then. But pride is a quiet thief. Now, under the basement light, it wasn't just memory. It was math, ink, proof. On the last page, in Henry's handwriting, 5 words, based on original model by ML. He had known all along. I closed the folder, heart steady. I had saved his company once without anyone knowing. Now it was time to save myself. The next morning, I called a number I hadn't dialed in decades. "Whitmore and Associates," a woman said. "It's Margaret Lane," I answered. "I need to speak to Mr. Whitmore." A pause, then the old voice came on the line. "Mrs. Lane, it's been a long time." "Yes," I said, "and it's time." When I arrived that afternoon, the sun hit the glass building just like it had in 1999, the year Lane Analytics was born. Mr. Whitmore was older now, silver hair, slow hands, but the same measured calm. He motioned me inside. "I heard about Henry," he said quietly. "He left me surrounded by people who want me gone," I replied. "I'm sorry," he said. I placed the folder on his desk, but he also left me this. He opened it carefully, page by page. His eyebrows rose. "This is the original Atlas patent draft." I nodded. "And my initials are right there." He flipped to the last page, 2 letters in blue ink, faint but visible. ML. He exhaled. "Margaret Lane." "Yes." He turned to a binder on the shelf labeled Lane Analytics, 1999. Inside was the formal filing, the same model, same equations, except the author line read Henry Lane, but in the bottom corner, half smudged, my initials. Same pen, same ink. Mr. Whitmore tapped the mark. "You see this? Same pressure stroke, same signature flow. That makes you co-author. If no transfer was ever signed, your ownership still stands, legally." I didn't breathe for a second. He smiled. "When Henry filed this, he told me the model came from a household experiment. I always wondered whose house." I laughed softly. "He used to say I had the better head for numbers." Whitmore nodded. "Now we can prove it." He stood, pulling a document from his drawer. "Once notarized, you'll be registered as co-inventor. Every renewal, every royalty, 50%. Depending on market value, that's no less than $4.7 million in residuals tied to this patent." I looked at the folder. My hands were still trembling, but my spine felt straighter than it had in years. For so long, I'd been the wife who kept the lights on. Now, I was the signature that built the foundation. "Do you think Henry meant for me to find it?" I asked. Whitmore's smile softened. "Knowing him, yes. He probably hoped you'd never have to, but he left the trail just in case." He closed the file and pushed it toward me. Margaret, this isn't just ownership. This is voice. The word stayed with me. Voice. When I stepped outside, the sky was turning amber. The city lights blinked on like old promises. I held the folder to my chest. For the first time in 27 years, my name felt like it belonged to me again. Henry once said, "You saved the company." I whispered into the wind, "Now I'll save myself." Mr. Whitmore called the next morning. His voice was calm, the kind that only carries two things, bad news or truth. "I've made an appointment," he said. "Emory University has a forensic specialist who authenticates legal handwriting. We'll verify your authorship." My hand trembled as I hung up, not from fear, from the weight of finally being seen. The next day I met him again. The conference table was cleared except for one folder and a flat device with a red beam across the top. "This is Dr. Morrison," Whitmore said, gesturing to a woman with steady eyes. "She's the best in the field. The court uses her findings in federal cases." Dr. Morrison smiled faintly. "Mrs. Lane, just relax. Write normally. We'll compare your sample to the originals." She handed me a pen. The room fell silent. I wrote 2 letters. M.L. 2 strokes, 40 years of proof. Dr. Morrison slid out the original document, Atlas Simulation, 1990. The paper was yellow, creased, but my initials in blue ink were still sharp. She placed both pages beneath the scanner. The red light moved slowly, measuring every curve and stroke. On the monitor, lines and numbers bloomed like heartbeats. "Pressure points align within 0.3%, she said. "Stroke length identical, ink distribution matches mid-90s formulation." Whitmore looked at me. "In plain English, it's you." Dr. Morrison nodded. 100% match. "Whoever signed this is sitting right here." For a moment, no one breathed. The proof filled the silence. Whitmore leaned forward. "Margaret, in this document, you're not a wife. You're a partner." The word hit like sunlight through dust. No one had called me that in decades. I wasn't a shadow. I was ink that refused to fade. I smiled faintly. Henry always said I had better handwriting. Dr. Morrison laughed. "Confident lines, deliberate pressure. People who write like this usually think before they speak." "I had a lot of time to think," I said. Whitmore stacked the papers carefully. "We'll notarize and log this today. Once certified, your authorship becomes legal fact. Your name will be added to the federal patent record. Every renewal, every royalty, half belongs to you." "Half," I repeated softly. 2 letters worth millions, and a lifetime of silence balanced at last. It wasn't about money. It was about visibility. "Henry used to joke," I said. "He ran the company, I ran everything else. Turns out both sides had my signature." Whitmore smiled. "Now the world will see it." When I left, the sky over Atlanta was pale gold. I held the folder against my chest. For weeks, I'd been living like a ghost. That afternoon, I felt human again. On the drive home, I kept thinking how history depends on the smallest things. A pen stroke, a set of initials. Who gets remembered, who gets erased. The house was quiet when I returned. Daniel and Heather were gone. Ruby was at school. I went downstairs, sat on the edge of my cot, and opened the folder once more. My initials stared back, small, almost invisible unless you knew where to look. I taped a copy beside the photo Ruby once mocked, the one labeled "Orange still, breathing, but barely." 2 images, side by side, the ghost they thought I was and the proof of who I am. For the first time since the funeral, I smiled. They erased my name from the walls, but not from the ink. It was a quiet morning when the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. These days, every call sounded like paperwork or pity, but something made me pick it up. "Mrs. Lane," a man said. "It's George Carson. I used to work with Henry Yahadwo back in the early years." The name hit instantly. Carson, one of the first partners. Back when the firm was just 3 desks, 1 phone line, and a dream. I hadn't heard his voice in over 20 years. "I'm sorry about Henry," he said. "I wanted to call sooner, but after everything that's come out, I think you deserve to know something." My pulse slowed. "What kind of something?" He hesitated. "Henry always told me the Atlas model was yours. He said he planned to make it right, that he owed you everything." The room went still. "He said that?" "Yes. He said, 'She built the foundation. I just built on top.'" I remember the night before the first investor meeting. He showed me your notebook and said, "Sai, she wrote it. I just sold it." The words sank like stones. I didn't speak up. Carson continued. Nobody back then wanted to believe a woman wrote the first patent. But I kept something. An old tape from that meeting. Henry's voice is on it, saying exactly that. My breath caught. You still have it? Yes, I'll send it to you. When the call ended, I sat frozen, the phone still warm in my hand. I wasn't shaking from shock. It was something deeper. Validation, maybe, after decades of silence. That afternoon, an email arrived. Subject line. For Margaret, from Henry. Attached, one audio file. The sound was rough, static-filled, but the voice, unmistakable. Henry. Papers rustled, men cleared their throats. Then his voice, steady, confident. The Atlas model wasn't my idea. She wrote it. I just sold it. Laughter in the background, then another line. Margaret did the groundwork. Without her math, there would be no company. I'll fix it one day. I owe her that much. Then the click of a tape ending. I didn't cry from grief this time. It was recognition. Quiet, overdue, clean. He had remembered. Not publicly, not to our children, but he had said it out loud. And left a record. For years I thought he'd erased me completely, but he hadn't. He'd left breadcrumbs. My initials on the patent, the folder labeled Atlas Simulation, and now this. His voice confirming what history had forgotten. I saved the file in 3 places. My computer, a flash drive, and a printed transcript for the lawyer. This proof wouldn't vanish again. That night, I called Whitmore. When I told him, he exhaled sharply. Margaret, a recording like that? Authenticated, it's airtight. Your authorship becomes irrefutable. I don't want the money, I said. I just want my name where it belongs. Before bed, I played the tape one more time. She wrote it. I just sold it. I whispered, You sold it. Well, Henry, now I'll keep it safe. I wasn't a ghost anymore. I was a witness to my own life, finally heard. When I turned off the light, my eyes caught the wall above my cot. The photo Ruby had mocked was still there, the red words beneath it. A ghost remembers everything. I took a blue pen and added one more line. Sometimes the dead defend you better than the living. And this time, the silence felt like respect. They called it a family dinner, but it felt like a countdown. The will reading was tomorrow. Tonight, they celebrated early. Daniel said it was to honor Dad's legacy. Yet there was music, champagne, and a private caterer charging $320 a head. Honor had nothing to do with it. It looked like greed wearing linen napkins. I sat at the far end again, same chair, same view, different illusion. The silverware gleamed brighter than their morals. The kind of shine meant for photos, not respect. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Whitmore had already confirmed everything. The patent, the signatures, the verification, 100% match. My initials, legally notarized, now part of the record. The paper sat folded inside my jacket pocket, weight pressing gently against my ribs, steady, deliberate. Proof has mass. Heather lifted her glass. To new beginnings, she said. Daniel grinned. Dad built the foundation. Now we'll carry it forward. Someone joked, Daniel gets the main house, Heather gets the company, kids get the lake cabin. They laughed like I wasn't sitting 10 feet away. Ruby kept her head down, pushing food across her plate. She hadn't met my eyes since she'd read my notebook. Truth can be heavy when it's still sinking. Heather turned suddenly. You look calm tonight, Margaret. Acceptance looks good on you. I smiled back. So does irony. She hesitated, uncertain whether to laugh or flinch. She chose laughter. People like her always do when they miss the warning. Daniel carved his steak. Tomorrow should go smoothly, no surprises. The lawyer said it'll be quick. Heather nodded. Simple. Just signatures and closure. That word again. Simple. They had no idea how complicated tomorrow was about to get. They kept talking, building fantasies. Plans for renovations, modern updates, new cars, new accounts. I let them talk. The more they spoke, the more I saw. They'd already buried me once. This was the paperwork. Daniel leaned back. Dad always said the key to success was knowing when to let go. He'd be proud of how efficient we're being. Efficient? That's what they called erasure now. I took a slow sip of water. Your father also said something else. Daniel looked up. What's that? That I saved his company. He frowned. What do you mean? Heather cut in, voice sharp with practiced charm. Oh, come on, Margaret. You know Dad built everything from scratch. You were the heart of the home. But business? That was Henry's world. I nodded. That's what everyone thought. She laughed. And that's what matters, doesn't it? What people believe? I met her eyes. For now. The table froze for a second, enough for tension to hum between silver and glass. Then Daniel forced a smile. Tomorrow's a good day, a clean start. I matched his smile. Yes, it will. Ruby finally looked up. For a heartbeat, the whole room disappeared. Just her and me, truth crossing the space between generations. She didn't speak, but she understood. The conversation shifted back to numbers, shares, percentages, assets. Heather discussed selling the lake cabin for a new $90,000 CUV. Daniel bragged about transferring 40% of company stock for tax efficiency. They spoke in decimals. I heard ghosts. I let them dream their empire on my silence. Tomorrow their voices would stop. When dessert plates cleared, Heather poured another glass. Margaret, I hope you feel at peace with how this turned out. It's what Henry would have wanted. I set my napkin down. Maybe, I said. Or maybe he wanted something else entirely. She smiled too tight. And what's that supposed to mean? I leaned back. You'll find out tomorrow. Daniel chuckled nervously. Mom, you're being mysterious again. I didn't reply. I smiled, the kind of smile that holds its breath before the storm. After they left, the house quieted. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the old clock, the one Daniel had tagged with a green sticker for himself, were the only sounds left. I traced my fingers along the table, the same one where I'd once fed them, taught them, believed in them. It used to hold warmth. Now, only echoes. In my jacket pocket, the papers rustled softly. Patent certification, notarized ownership, Henry's recorded confession, all stacked neatly, all waiting. I stood, folded my napkin, and whispered into the empty room. Tomorrow, they'll see what silence can build. The next morning, the family gathered at Whitmore and Associates. The conference room was bright and cold, the kind of light that makes truth impossible to hide. A 10-foot table, polished oak, 12 chairs, no warmth. Daniel took the head seat as if he'd earned it. Heather sat close, arms crossed, hiding nerves behind a social media smile. Ruby sat near the end, her phone face down, leg bouncing under the table. Whitmore walked in carrying two things, a folder and a small recorder. Good morning, he said. No one replied. He opened the folder, voice level. As executor of the estate of Mr. Henry Lane, I'm here to execute his will and final addendum. Everything you hear today is legally binding. Heather forced a laugh. We understand, Mr. Whitmore. Let's just get through it. Daniel added, Dad was clear. Let's keep it simple. Whitmore pressed play, static. Then Henry's voice, thin but steady. If my children ever forget their mother's name, they shall inherit their memories, not her fortune. The air vanished. Even the AC stopped humming. Heather blinked. What does that mean? It means, Whitmore said, your father tied inheritance to conduct toward Mrs. Lane. Every recorded act of disrespect counts as a penalty. Daniel frowned. Recorded? Whitmore slid a transcript across the table, 23 pages, time-stamped. 2 days after the funeral, he said, your voices were captured in the main house. Under the will's clause 8, those qualify as acts of dishonor. Each incident deducts 1%, up to 80%. He looked at Daniel. You reached the maximum. Daniel's face flushed. You can't do this. That's my father's company. Whitmore didn't blink. Your father already did. Silence spread like smoke. Daniel pointed at me, trembling. You made him write this. I met his eyes. Your father wrote it himself. He shouted, You poisoned him against us. Whitmore lifted a hand. Mr. Lane, sit down. There's more. Henry's voice returned through the speaker, softer now, but sharp enough to cut glass. Margaret wasn't just my wife. She was my partner. Without her, Lane Analytics would not exist. If anyone disrespects her, their share returns to the company she built. Heather's jaw dropped, Ruby's breath caught. Daniel just stared at the recorder, as if staring hard could rewind the truth. Whitmore turned to me. Mrs. Lane, do you have the verification documents? I took them from my jacket, sealed, notarized, weight like a heartbeat, and slid them forward. He read aloud, Authorship confirmation, Atlas simulation model, filed under Margaret Lane, verified by Emory University Dr. L. Morrison, authorized by the U.S. Patent Office. Then he looked at them. Clause 9 of Mr. Lane's will designates Mrs. Lane as co-founder and primary rights holder of Lane Analytics intellectual property. Heather whispered, What does that mean? It means, Whitmore said evenly, control of Lane Analytics transfers to Mrs. Lane effective immediately. Daniel sagged into his chair, the man who just lost 80% of everything. Heather went pale. You can't take this from us. I turned to her. I'm not taking anything. I'm keeping what I built. No one spoke. The recorder clicked off. Whitmore closed the file. This concludes the reading of the will. Daniel stood, voice cracking. Mom, you can't. We're your family. I looked at him, the boy I'd once carried through storms, now a man undone by his own echo. You spoke first, I said quietly. The will simply listened. Heather stared at the table. Ruby's eyes met mine, wet. She mouthed, sorry. I nodded. Then learned from it. I rose. Light from the window hit the portrait of Henry on the wall. His reflection spilled across the polished table, his face overlapping mine. It didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like closure. Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it signs papers in silence. I picked up my coat, thanked Whitmore, and walked to the door. Behind me, no one moved. At the threshold, I turned once. He kept the empire, I said. I kept the receipt. Then I left, my footsteps the only sound that dared to follow. The morning arrived heavy and still, like the house knew something irreversible was about to happen. Whitmore's office gleamed, polished oak, silver light, air too clean to feel human. The kind of room where truth didn't need warmth to survive. Daniel and Heather sat close together at the far end, whispering like conspirators waiting for a verdict. Ruby kept her eyes on her phone, pretending not to listen, though her leg bounced under the table. I took my seat near the corner, not too close, not too far. I wasn't there to be seen, only to finish what had already begun. At exactly 9:00 a.m., Whitmore entered, folder under one arm, recorder in hand. Every step of his carried precision. Thank you all for coming, he said. We're here to execute the final will and testament of Mr. Henry Lane. Heather smiled, polite, rehearsed. Of course. Let's get this over with. Henry was a man of precision. I'm sure it'll be simple. Daniel added, Yes, we just want to honor Dad's wishes. Whitmore didn't respond. He pressed play on the recorder, a crackle of static, then Henry's voice, frail but unwavering. If my children ever forget their mother's name, they shall inherit their memories, not her fortune. The air conditioner stopped humming. Even breath felt loud. Heather blinked fast. What does that mean? Whitmore opened another folder. It means your father left conditional clauses tied to Mrs. Lane's treatment, both during his life and after. Daniel's jaw tightened. Conditional clauses? For what? Whitmore slid a transcript across the table. 23 pages, timestamps running along the side. Your father's home system recorded post-funeral conversations. Statements of contempt directed toward Mrs. Lane activated Clause 11. He adjusted his glasses, reading aloud. Check her pulse at the will reading. She built soup, he built an empire. Each remark equals a 1% deduction, up to 80% maximum. You reached 80. Heather gasped. 80%? Daniel slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this. Whitmore didn't blink. Your father already did. Silence spread like cold water. Daniel turned on me, voice cracking. You made him do this. You manipulated him. I met his eyes. Your father wrote his will? I didn't. He pointed, furious. You poisoned him against us. Whitmore's voice cut through. Mr. Lane, sit down. There's more. He pressed play again. Henry's voice filled the room, softer, slower, but sharp enough to slice through years of noise. Margaret was not just my wife. She was my partner. Without her, Lane Analytics would not exist. If any part of my estate passes to those who disrespect her, I'd rather it return to the company she helped build. Heather froze. Ruby looked down. Daniel stared at the recorder like it might undo itself. Whitmore turned to me. Mrs. Lane, may we have the verification documents? I reached into my jacket, pulled out the sealed envelope, and handed it over. He unfolded it carefully and read aloud. Authorship verification, Atlas simulation model, filed under Margaret Lane, verified by Emory University and confirmed by the U.S. Patent Office. Whitmore set the page on the table. This officially recognizes Mrs. Lane as co-founder and co-creator of the proprietary model that built Lane Analytics. Per Mr. Lane's directive, controlling ownership now transfers to her. Heather's voice came out thin. You mean, she owns the company? Whitmore nodded. Yes, along with all patents and associated trusts. Daniel sank back, color draining from his face. Dad wouldn't, I interrupted softly. He did, Daniel, because he remembered who helped him build it. He stood, hands trembling. Mom, you don't have to take everything. We're still your family. I looked at him. You spoke first, I said. The will simply listened. No one spoke after that. The recorder clicked off with a small final sound, like the closing of a door. Whitmore gathered the papers, voice steady. This concludes the execution of Mr. Lane's will. Mrs. Lane, congratulations. Lane Analytics and its assets are now under your name. I didn't smile. Relief isn't joy. It's oxygen returning after years underwater. I rose, sliding the chair back. The sunlight hit the portrait of Henry on the wall. For a heartbeat, our reflections merged in the glass. His fading, mine still solid. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like equilibrium restored. Justice doesn't shout. It signs quietly, in ink that never forgets. I turned once more to the table. Heather's hands shook. Daniel kept his head down. Ruby met my gaze, eyes red, guilt and understanding tangled together. I gave a small nod. Not forgiveness yet, but permission to begin again. At the door, I paused. Your father built the empire, I said. I just kept the receipt. And then I walked out, my footsteps the only thing that dared to follow. That night, the house finally went still. No footsteps in the hallway, no laughter that didn't belong to Joy, just the low hum of the heater, the ticking clock, and me. The folder from Whitmore sat on the table, its edges worn from my hands. The ink on the last page still smelled faintly metallic, like a door finally closing. I should have felt victorious, maybe even free. Instead, I felt quiet. Not the quiet of loss, the quiet that follows a storm when there's nothing left to prove. The phone rang. The screen lit up with a familiar number. For a moment, I almost let it ring out. Then I answered. Mom? Daniel's voice. Smaller now. Not the man from the boardroom. The boy who used to run home with scraped knees and wild stories. Yes, I said. I'm here. There was a pause. I could hear him breathing, uneven, unsure. I didn't know, he said finally. I swear, Mom. I didn't know what Dad meant. I didn't know it was you. I didn't speak. Silence can teach harder than words ever could. He filled it with the sound of breaking. I thought he built everything. I thought you were just there, taking care of us. I didn't see it. I closed my eyes. That's what hurt, Daniel. Not that you took, that you looked right at me, Awowan, and didn't see. His breath caught. I was proud of him, Mom. I thought I was protecting his name. I know, I said. So was I. For too long. The line went quiet. Two people, one truth. When I asked, what do you want, Daniel? He didn't hesitate. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I nodded, though he couldn't see it. Thank you. But I didn't say I forgive you. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's a distance, something you measure by how far the hurt has traveled without you. He exhaled, shaky. I don't expect anything. I just wanted you to know I finally understand. I looked at Henry's photo on the wall, the one from the will reading, same steady smile, same quiet authority. I think he wanted you to, I said softly. I'll call tomorrow, Daniel whispered. You don't have to, I said. Rest, Daniel. Just rest. The call ended with his breathing fading into static. Not closure, not reconciliation, just silence shared equally this time. I set the phone down. The house felt different, still heavy, but not hollow, the kind of silence that stays earned. I opened the drawer, placed Whitmore's folder inside, and locked it. Not to hide, to finish. Truth didn't need defending anymore. The photo of Henry caught a thin slant of moonlight. I spoke to it quietly. You were right. They remember now. The air seemed warmer, not happy. Just settled, like justice cooling down to peace. I turned off the lights one by one, each click softer than the last. In the hallway, our wedding photo hung where it always had, 2 young faces, one shared dream. I traced the edge of the frame. We did build something, I said, even if they forgot for a while. By the window, the night stretched wide and silent. A car passed outside, was slow fading. Maybe Daniel leaving town. Maybe just the sound of guilt learning how to go quiet. I took a deep breath and spoke to the dark, not whispering this time. Forgiveness isn't silence, I said, it's distance. And for once, the silence answered back, not empty, but free. The morning after everything was signed, I began to pack. Not much to take, because what mattered had never been things. Just the moments that no longer fit inside these walls. The house was too big now, too loud in memory, too quiet in sound. I moved slowly from room to room, not to clean, not to count, just to say goodbye. Everywhere I turned, the neon stickers waited. Green, pink, yellow. Daniel's handwriting. This one's mine. Each corner I peeled made a small sighing sound, the kind that happens when something finally gives up pretending to belong. The paper came away easily, leaving faint marks behind, like the memory of touch. I took my time. The first sticker came off the clock Henry used to wind every Sunday. The second, the dining chair they'd assigned me the night they moved me downstairs. Another from the china cabinet, where our wedding plates still sat untouched. Each one fell like a quiet verdict. By the time I reached the living room, the floor was covered in colors. Small confessions of greed turned harmless. The house didn't feel cruel anymore. It felt tired but calm, like it was exhaling after years of being held too tight. The light through the windows had changed too. Not sharp, not cold, just warm enough to see clearly. I held the last sticker, a green one from the grandfather clock, Daniel's first claim. I smiled, peeled it off slowly and let it fall. It fluttered down like something finally letting go. Upstairs, the hallway still smelled faintly of cedar. Henry's portrait hung in its old place, his eyes following like they always did. You'd laugh if you saw this mess, I told him softly. But it's done. They remember now. The silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt kind. In the bedroom, everything was neat, the nightstand bare except for an envelope with Ruby's name. It wasn't a will, it was a seed. Don't inherit silence, I wrote. Use your voice, even when no one listens. I think she'll understand. Outside, the garden smelled of earth and rain. The old rose bushes were gone, replaced by orchids I'd grown when I couldn't sleep. Most had only stayed green, but this morning one had bloomed. A single purple flower, tall and unbothered. You made it, I whispered. We both did. No voices, no laughter that cut, no echo of taking, only wind and life that doesn't need applause. I walked to the gate and turned for one last look. The house stood still, not mine, not theirs. It belonged to quiet now, the good kind, the healing kind. I locked the door, slid the key beneath the old mat, and said, "Thank you." The sun broke through the clouds for a brief golden second. Light caught on the windows like a nod goodbye. They once called me a ghost, a shadow, a relic of something gone. But as I walked away, I understood. I wasn't haunting the past. I had outlived it. They called me a ghost. Now I haunt only peace. A year passed quietly, the kind of quiet that doesn't erase, just softens. I moved to Taipei Island into a small apartment by the sea. 2 rooms, white walls, one narrow balcony that caught the 6 a.m. light. I didn't need more than that. Most mornings I woke to the cry of gulls and the smell of salt. Coffee, notebook, tide. The routine was simple, deliberate. After years of living inside other people's noise, stillness finally felt like company instead of punishment. From the royalties, I used $82,000 to start something new. Not a company, not a memorial, a correction. The Forgotten Founders Foundation. A place for women who'd been told their time was up. Women who'd built quietly, given freely, and vanished from the story once the credits rolled. It started small, a rented office above a bait shop, 3 computers, 1 coffee machine that hissed like an old cat. Every week, 5 to 10 women came through the door. Some learned accounting, others learned coding. A few just learned how to speak in rooms that had ignored them. Watching them stumble, laugh, start again, it felt like justice in slow motion. No applause, just renewal. One late afternoon, as I was sorting through letters, there was a knock on the door. When I opened it, Ruby stood there. Older now, 24 maybe. The edges of girlhood replaced by gravity. She held an envelope. "Hi, Grandma," she said, voice small. "I found your journal." I smiled. "Did you read it?" She nodded. "Every page." Then, quietly, "I'm sorry." The ocean filled the silence between us. I could have said 100 things about time, guilt, forgiveness, but I didn't. Instead, I reached for her hand. "I have something for you." From my desk drawer, I pulled a cream-colored certificate, her name written in blue ink. Ruby Lane, the ghost who remembered scholarship. Her eyes shimmered. "You named it after yourself?" I shook my head. "Not after me," I said softly. "After every woman who was told she was invisible." She laughed through the tears. "It's perfect." We sat on the balcony, the water below folding and unfolding, like memory learning how to rest. The sky turned a quiet orange, not dramatic, just steady. After a while, Ruby asked, "Grandma, how did you stay so quiet all those years? Didn't it hurt?" I looked out at the horizon. The waves kept coming, numbered by no one, relentless and patient. "Silence isn't weakness," I said. "It's waiting for the right echo." She nodded, eyes on the sea. For the first time, she didn't look like someone haunted by legacy. She looked ready to begin her own. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of salt and orchids from the windowsill. I leaned back, let the sound of the ocean fill the spaces words could never reach. Some stories end with applause. Mine ended with proof and peace, the kind that doesn't ask permission to stay. The waves roll in, steady, deliberate, brushing against the rocks with a rhythm that sounds like someone breathing after a long run. Morning light spills across the porch railing, touches the white curtains, glows against a small wooden sign hanging by the door. The wood is weathered now, edges chipped, salt-stained from years of sea air, but the carving remains, clean, deep, and certain. This house was funded by a burden. Enjoy the silence. No plaque, no explanation, just that. People who pass by stop. Some smile, think it's clever. Others pause longer, sensing there's a story inside the quiet. Inside, the air is still. 2 mugs sit on the table, one half full, the other still warm. A notebook lies open, pages lined with deliberate handwriting. Not plans, not confessions. Just clarity. A breeze lifts the curtains. On the wall, a photo in a thin, silver frame. Margaret and Ruby sitting by the water. No posing, no grandeur. Just sunlight, wind, and peace. The camera lingers. Then her voice returns, calm, grounded, unhurried. The kind of voice that doesn't raise itself to be heard. It simply knows you'll listen. "You can erase her from the story," she says, "but not from the foundation." The shot widens. Through the window, the sea shimmers, wide, forgiving, infinite. The sound of waves blends with the faint echo of piano, the same melody that opened her story, now slower, softer, like a truth exhaled instead of fought. The breeze carries her final words, a whisper that feels like stone beneath water. "We built quietly. That doesn't mean we didn't build." Fade to white. The piano fades too, leaving only the ocean, its rhythm constant, patient, eternal. On screen, simple text appears, dedicated to every woman who built in silence, and to every voice still waiting to be heard.